أسرت جوزي، قتلت أخوي، دمرت بيتي وأحلامي، وأنا حالياً بربي ابني لحالي. ابني عمره 1 و4 شهور.
إحنا نزحنا الاحتلال، هو اللي طلعنا من بيوتنا، هو اللي شردنا، هو اللي ما خلناش نضلنا بمأوى ولا في بيت ولا في مكان. إحنا وأهالينا، هذه مش حياتنا ولا عمرها كانت حياة.
قبل 75 سنة عملوا مجازر فينا واغتصبوا نساء، وحالياً بغزة بيرتكبوا إبادات جماعية، بيستهدفوا المستشفيات، المدارس، الجامعات، المساجد والكنائس، منازل المواطنين العزل. إبادة جماعية، وكلكم بس واقفين عم تتفرجوا على الإبادة اللي بتصير.
ما احناش عارفين وين نحط الصغار، ما احناش عارفين وين نحط الكبار. النسوان تعرض، الشباب راحوا، الشيوخ راحوا، حرام عليهم يا عالم يا.
من يعيش في مدينة القدس ويعيش في فلسطين يعرف بأنه إذا خرج من بيته قد لا يعود، وقد يعود جريحاً أو شهيداً محملاً على الأكتاف، أو قد لا يعود يعني يكون أسيراً في سجون الاحتلال.
ويعني بأن قلبك دائما هو معرض لأن يخفق كثيرا، لأن بين لحظة والأخرى من الممكن أن يتم اعتقال أو استشهاد أطفالك وأبنائك. فالأمومة في فلسطين لها خصوصية عالية لأنها ممزوجة بالقهر وممزوجة بالحرمان وممزوجة بالخوف والقلق الدائم.
يعني لو احنا بنقول في نسبة 1% انها تتصلح امورنا وحياتنا كأم كزوجة كبنت كطفل، احنا كلنا فقدنا اشياء. هم لو هذه الاشياء صارت في اي دولة اجنبية او لها حقوق زي اوكرانيا او اي دولة تانية، كل العالم وقف ضد روسيا.
أنا بتمنى صراحة إنه العالم يوقف مع فلسطين، نتمنى إنه الكل يوقف إسرائيل عند حدها، يعني خلص بكفي لحد هون.
أنا بوجه رسالتي إلى قيادة العالم إنهم يقفوا معانا وقف إطلاق النار. إحنا تعبنا وأطفالنا تعبوا كتير، إحنا علينا كتير ومرينا بصعوبات كتير كبيرة.
وين؟ هذا يطمني أنا غلط، بكفي يا عالم، بكفي ظلم. احنا ناس غلابة، اقسم والأولاد ماتوا بدون ما ياكلوا.
أنا بالنسبة لي ك8 آذار بس حاليا وين اليوم هذا؟ إيش عمل لنا؟ إيش فادنا إنه المرأة إلها يوم وهم مش قادرين ينصفوا المرأة الفلسطينية؟ هم قادرين ينصفوا نسوان العالم كلهيتهم، لكن كمرأة فلسطينية وين إحنا؟
يعني في يوم المرأة العالمي عندما أنظر إلى ما يحدث مع النساء في كل العالم والورود التي تقدم لهن والاحتفالات التي تقام لأجلهن، أضحك، قد أضحك قهراً، قد أضحك أيضاً يعني استهزاءً بما يحدث من مفارقة. فأقول لقادة العالم: ما هي الحقوق التي تحققت للمرأة الفلسطينية منذ ذلك العام إلى اليوم؟ أين هو العالم عن حقوق المرأة الفلسطينية؟ أين هم قادة العالم عن المرأة الفلسطينية وما يحدث مع المرأة الفلسطينية؟
يوم المرأة بعني له إنه بيبرز صوتي أكثر، بظهرني أكثر، بظهر معاناته، خصوصاً ومعاناتنا إحنا النساء والفتيات الفلسطينيين.
فيأتي هذا اليوم ليذكرني بأن المرأة بحاجة لوقفة من العالم الأجمع ومن نساء العالم أجمعاً لكي يساهموا بشكل أو بآخر بإيقاف ما يحصل تجاه المرأة الفلسطينية في فلسطين.
فوجه رسالة إنه عن جد خلص إحنا المرأة عامة إحنا تعبنا كتير، إحنا بكفي عن جد، بكفي لحد هنيقف معانا.
خلصوا الحرب، بكفي دمار، خلصوا الحرب، بدناش أسرى، بدناش حدا، خلصوا الحرب، خلصوا الحرب.
and tell her that I'm witnessing this chronic, insidious genocide, and I'm really scared, and questioning my fundamental belief in the godness of human nature. This has to stop. I think it's a good idea for us all to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop. I don't think it's an extremist thing to do anymore. I still really want to dance around the pet Benetter and have boyfriends and make comics for my co-workers. But I also want this to stop. Disbelief and horror is what I feel. Disappointment. I am disappointed that this is the base reality of our world and that we, in fact, participate in it. This is not at all what I asked for when I came into this world. This is not at all what the people here asked for when they came into this world. This is not the world you and that wanted me come into when you decided to have me. This is not what I meant when I looked at the capital lake and said, this is the white world and I am coming to it. When I came back from Palestine, I probably will have nightmares and constantly feel guilty for not being here. But I can channel into more work. Coming here is one of the better things that I have ever done. So when I sound crazy, or if the Israeli military should break with their racist tendency not to injure white people, please pin the reason securely on that fact that I am in the midst of genocide, which I am also indirectly supporting and for which my government is largely responsible. I love you and Dad. Sorry for the diatriba. Okay, some strange man next to me just gave me some peace, so I need to eat and thank them. Rachel Corey, February 28, 2003. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this panel discussion titled Invisible Struggles and Brave Hearts, Being a Woman in Palestine. My name is Fatih Er, and it is my absolute pleasure to be moderating this session today. I just wanted to open our session with the letter of Rachel Corey. Exactly 21 years ago, she killed by Israeli forces just near Gaza. I'm a Turkish journalist, and I have been working as a journalist last 25 years. And I spent my 3 years in Palestine, in Jerusalem, in Shafat, and I've been in every part of Palestine, including Gaza, West Bank, and occupied Jerusalem. Today marks the 164th day since Israel began its indiscriminate bombing campaign in Gaza. We have seen the images, heard the testimonies of death, destructions, and devastations. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, with thousands more presumed dead under the rubble, 70% of whom are women and children. More than 1 million women and girls have been displaced since October 7 without access to health care and hygiene products, food and shelter. Over the next 75 minutes, we will discuss the struggles they face, the political will or the lack of to stop Israelis' assault and wars within this war on Gaza. Before we start our session, I would like to give a warm welcome for the keynote speech to the chair of KADEM, Women and Democracy Association, Associate Professor Ms. Saliha Okur Gümrükçoğlu.
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to our event organized by KADEM, the Women and Democracy Foundation, and I want to thank the Permanent Mission of Turkey to the United Nations for their contribution. KADEM has always shown its solidarity with Palestine through various activities. We have organized several seminars and protests to raise awareness and to uplift the Palestinian community. KADEM's youth volunteers have played a vital role in organizing events to support Palestine against the ongoing genocide. Recently, we have taken the initiative to offer scholarships to Palestinian students who are currently studying in Turkey. And we decided to dedicate, or this year, CSW side event to amplify the voice of Palestinian women. This event focused on the suffering and hardship women and children enduring disaster and war. I have a text on my hand, yes. However, I am still determining how effectively my words can convey the gravity of the situation, because we are at the end of the line. As you all know, March is traditionally a time to honor and recognize women globally. We intend to discuss positive aspects of women worldwide, but we are currently facing challenging situations. We are at a critical point in time where individuals with a sense of morality are questioning the world's trajectory. We are all facing a trial. For centuries, Jews have been dehumanized and ultimately faced the threat of extermination during the Holocaust. It was the greatest atrocity. The scars of this catastrophe still stain the soul of humanity. And now, the world is horrified to witness once again the perpetration of endless evil. The ideology that looms over Palestine today is bombarding the legacy of human values. It will take a long time to rebuild trust in the shaken foundation of humanity. It also reveals the West's illusion of moral and human superiority. We must remember that genocide in Gaza and the massive walls dividing the West Bank are not just physical barriers. Behind the blockade, which conveys an agreement cannot breach, lies the mentality of occupation and colonialism. Israel is the implementer of colonialist settler practices in our era. The global community's support for the Palestinians sends a clear message. This mindset must come to an end. This is a factor that elevates the Palestinian struggle to a fight for humanity. Why do we say that wars and disasters affect women most fatally? Why do we call the women of Gaza and Palestine brave hearts? It is not because war affects men and children less. It is because the physiological and psychological aspect of war affecting women also have visible effects on men and children. Fedaiza is one of those mothers who had to give birth in these difficult conditions. She was 6 months pregnant when the Israel attacks on Gaza began, and she had to leave her home in 20 minutes due to the threat of airstrikes. Feda then had to relocate many times for fear for her life. She says that her grandmother's advice kept coming back to her during the struggles. Her grandmother lived throughout the first Nakba and advised Feda to hold on to her children tightly so that would not be lost. I learned from my grandmother's mistakes in 1948, she says. I ask you, should the lesson passed down from generation to generation be how to survive a genocide? The fact that the lesson was passed down from a grandmother to a granddaughter demonstrates the magnitude and enduring impact of the catastrophe. This also reveals that Palestinian women embody the essence of Palestinian freedom in their bodies and souls. A young mother from Gaza with 6 children said to one of my friends who was visiting Gaza, Israel would kill 2 of my children. 2 of them would be working to support the family, and the other 2 would study and pursue careers. This awareness reveals why Israel openly targets children and women and destroys the healthcare system. Palestinians, despite the challenges they have faced for 75 years, have been safeguarding not only their own lives, but also the dignity of humanity against inconceivable evils. Their stance represents a universal human position. Therefore, we owe it to ourselves as human beings to stand with the people of Gaza, amplify their voice, and work to protect them. The stand of people around the world is clear. Anyone who does not speak out against this genocide, anyone who continues to support what is happening today, sooner or later will regret this decision. All ideologies, values, and institutions that are considered universal are collapsing one by one with every bomb dropped on the Palestinians. Adorno had challenged these values and stated that it is barbaric to write poetry after Auschwitz. These values must now acknowledge their bankruptcy. The colonial powers must humbly bow their heads before the peoples of the world. Our message to the world is this: humanity must overcome this dilemma. We need to dismantle the hegemonic system that colonializes and disrupts the world, paced by invading and destroying countries. As the wheels of system continue to turn, we are witnessing the erosion of our fundamental universal values. We need to seek a new, really inclusive and comprehensive approach. It is a responsibility to elevate universal values from where they have fallen. It is our responsibility to imbue them with a new mindset and perspective, with global resilience and hope. The people of the world have been roaring for months in support of global peace and universal resistance. As women of the world, we demand universal peace. We support the justified and noble struggle of Palestinian women. We will not forget. We will not forget what is happening in Gaza, Jerusalem, Nablus, and throughout Palestine. As people who believe in supreme, in humanity, in goodness, we will not forget the war aimed at destroying all universal human values. We will not forget that the courageous and honorable women and men of Gaza are raising humanity with great determination and commitment. Thank you for your attention.
We also thank you to Chair of KADEM, Associated Professor Ms. Saliha Okur. Dear guests, let's begin, and I would like to introduce my guest first. We have Ambassador Her Excellency Feda Abdulhadi join us today. She is Deputy Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the UN. And I would like to welcome Zeyna Azam. She is a Palestinian-American poet, writer, editor, and community activist that has been volunteering at We Are Not Numbers, a youth-led Palestinian non-profit project in Gaza Strip. And she is currently the Poet Laureate of the City of Alexandria, Virginia. My next guest is Lena Berkavi, founder of Lena's Thurba, where she is reclaiming Palestinian culture on Thurba at that time. Dr. Kerima Kouamerla also joined us today. She is a co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide, a global health coalition committed to stopping genocide. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Safa Salam, the co-founder of the American Foundation for Improving Arab Health, an organization that studies the healthcare experience of their community while advocating for their enfranchisement within America's political institutions. First, I would like to start with our ambassador, Feda. Thank you for coming again. Turkey's President Erdogan has a saying, "The world is bigger than five," referring especially to the veto power in the Security Council, which seems to be the main obstacle to addressing injustice worldwide. As someone who has served within the UN for many years, do you believe that the reform is necessary in the Security Council, and is it going to happen?
Kind introduction and my appreciation, of course, to KADEM for the invitation to participate in this important event, to focus our attention on the women of Palestine and their many struggles, but also, I think, their remarkable resilience. And we are grateful, of course, for Turkey's unwavering solidarity for Palestine. Tragically, Palestine's women have long endured adversity, and none more intense than the present time, reaching catastrophic levels in Gaza as Israel, the occupying power, wages a genocidal war on the Palestinian people. And as we all know, the decades leading up to this horrific moment have been years of constant struggles due to Israel's grave human rights abuses and collective punishment and oppression against them for generations. From the Nakba in 1948 through 57 years of Israel's colonial occupation, through decades of apartheid policies and over 17 years of blockade and cyclical wars on Gaza, culminating in the genocide that we are witnessing today. And so Palestinian women and their families have endured an endless Nakba. But for all of these atrocities, all of these war crimes and crimes against humanity, there has never been any accountability. There has never been any consequences for Israel's defiance of the United Nations, especially the Security Council, and its breaches of international law. And this has obviously led to only more crimes and more instability, more tragedies and catastrophes. And so this brings me specifically to your question as to whether I believe that the reform of the Security Council is necessary, and I definitely do believe so. It is a must. It is not a question of yes or no. It must reform itself because we are here today. The women and people of Palestine are in this horrific situation because of the Security Council's failure to uphold its charter duties and to implement over 80 resolutions on Palestine from 1948 to the present day. And that failure has allowed this historic injustice to fester for years. It's an open wound not only for Palestine, but for our region and for the international community as a whole. And it has had grave consequences. It has allowed for the shredding of the fabric of Palestinian society, but also the weakening of the fabric of the post-World War II international system. And it's a deficiency that has seriously undermined the UN's credibility and authority. And we see this with global citizens everywhere, increasingly questioning the role and the worth of the Security Council when it remains paralyzed and unable to address global crises, and the question of Palestine being the most glaring failure of the Council and the longest standing crisis on its agenda. And we all know in the Palestine's case that the reason for this failure is the use of veto by one permanent member in the Council, the United States of America, which has for decades shielded Israel from any accountability for its violations of international law and its open contempt of the Security Council. And we hear this over and over. We're witnessing it today in its most blatant form, where despite the appeals for a ceasefire in Gaza from the overwhelming majority of countries, 153 countries since the 8th of December in the General Assembly, and surely many more by now. And yet the U.S. has vetoed 3 times since October 2023 the call for a ceasefire. And so opposing this global outcry for a ceasefire and emboldening and arming Israel to carry on with its genocidal war against the Palestinian people. And you described the impact of that war with over 31,000 Palestinians, including more than 9,000 women and more than 13,000 children killed. And those are the ones that are accounted for. And this does not count the more than 8,000 missing. It does not count those that have been wounded, more than 73,000 people, many of whom, if they do not die of their wounds and survive, will suffer lifelong disabilities and traumas. And all of this is being perpetrated against the civilian population, and still there is no demand by the Security Council for a ceasefire, despite the fact that the broad majority in the Council, 13 out of 15 member states, have voted in favor of a humanitarian ceasefire repeatedly, and the last time was on the 20th of February. as the minimum ask to save human lives and to stop the forced transfer of the Palestinian people and to alleviate this humanitarian catastrophe and to stop the destruction of our society. And all the while that the U.S. veto has prevented a ceasefire call, it has again also prevented the Council from holding Israel accountable for its crimes. And so in the absence of consequences, Israel, obviously does not feel any pressure to respect the Council decisions or to comply with international law, and on the contrary, has only intensified its violations and its breaches. And so we do believe that had there been consequences, we definitely would not have been facing the situation that we are in today, facing a genocide and an existential crisis for Palestine, but also a threat to regional and international peace and security. And so just to wrap up the question, I think that our view is that there must be reform. Our view is that the veto should be eliminated. And if it is not eliminated, then its use has to be restricted in cases of mass atrocities and crimes against humanity, such as we are witnessing today, and that this reform is absolutely urgent. And there's too much at stake for Palestine, but also too much at stake for the international community. And I think that the international mobilization in support and solidarity for the Palestinian people is because it is a just cause, but also because there is this understanding that there is too much at stake for the world today, and much of it rests on this litmus test of the Palestine question.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Even last night, we heard Israelis attacked the Shifa hospital again and killed many there. And when I was entering Gaza, this is my first time in UN. I have been working as a, war correspondent or conflict zone correspondent. I've been in every part of the world, in Palestine, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, in Somalia. And I made a joke when we're entering the inside. I'm sorry to say that. I said, I think the only place can UN secure is the UN building in New York, because there was a heavy security when we're going inside, and it's maybe shame for me to say this in UN building, but it was. And I would like to continue with Karama. When I was working in Gaza, I conducted interviews with dozens of doctors. And I just said as well, there was another attack in Shifa hospital. And I never forget one instance when a doctor mentioned how they struggled to obtain accurate results for patients' blood tests. Due to shortages, they had to wash blood tubes and reuse them for other patients. But because the water in Gaza is salty, obtaining accurate results become extremely difficult. This is just an example, actually. I would like to ask you what other challenges that the medical community faces in Gaza at the moment.
Thank you, Fateh. Thank you, KADEM, for having us, and thank you for my fellow Palestinian women. And thank you for this question. So, we just heard about Al-Shifa Hospital, and all of us are shocked because every day we wake up and we are shocked even more when we think we reached the limit. I have a lot of contacts with my colleagues in Gaza right now, and what you have witnessed in probably 2012, 2013 is not even comparable to what's happening right now. Right now, 6 out of 36 hospitals are partially working after being damaged. So, the rest of the hospitals are not working. Al-Shifa just gathered itself to work again, only to be bombarded and attacked once again. The doctors and the nurses and the medical staff are working under extreme conditions. The medications are lacking, and the sanitation is extremely poor. Right now, it's not the test tubes that are being reused. Right now, the endotracheal tubes are being pulled from one patient who might have died, rinsed, and used for another patient. That is an extreme risk for infections, extreme risk for antibiotic-resistant infections, and it will not only affect Gaza, it will affect all of us, all over the world. Because what we are seeing of outbreaks of infections that have become extreme. So there are no labs that are working. There are a handful of CAT scans and MRI machines in Gaza that have been destroyed completely. The doctors are working blindly. Today you see a patient, but you have no way to chart what is happening to this patient. So every day it's, you come, you see your patients, you have to guess what is wrong with them and try your best. Our doctors are operating on patients without anesthesia, and that's an extreme mental and physical stress to a degree that is unimaginable. The invention of anesthesia transformed the medical field. It made it much gentler to people. We are back to medieval times where limbs are sawed without anesthesia and without sanitary conditions. One of our nurses from Doctors Against Genocide was there. When she came back, she said, every wound is infected in Gaza, whether it's small, whether it's large, whether it's an amputation. The hospitals smell of pus. The patients are coming completely starved. And that delays infection healing, it delays recovery, and it creates so much stress on the body. Going back to women, on Women's History Month in the United States, women have really been affected to a huge degree. There are 60,000 pregnant women in Gaza. 63 women are killed daily. That is a busload of women every day that's being killed. 183 women are giving birth every day. Every day, the women are giving birth to premature babies and babies who are born very small for gestational age. We know that these conditions create complications. So these babies that are born are at very high risk for global developmental delays. I'm a neurologist, I'm a pediatric neurologist, so I'm very acutely aware of what it means to have a premature baby without neonatal ICU and without care. This baby is at risk for intellectual disability, for mental health disease, for medical problems like diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and a slew of mental health difficulties. There is a much higher risk of schizophrenia with patients who are born prematurely and who are born under stress. So the situation is extreme, and we are hearing now of the children who are dying of starvation. Over 30 children have died already. 25% of the population in Gaza are in the category of severe famine. Severe famine is where, there's zero food security, and it means that the risk of medical complications is extremely high, and it includes death. So the medical situation is extreme, and it has mobilized a lot of the medical community to actually try to find a solution. One thing that I wanted to touch on is a concept in Palestine that is called sumud. My Palestinian sisters and brothers know what that means. It means steadfastness. And the symbol of sumud is the olive tree. And the symbol of sumud is the peasant Palestinian women who hold the world on her shoulders. Because Palestinian women have been connected to the land, especially the peasants. They have cultivated the olive tree. They collected the crops. They cooked meals from the land. Sumud is our connectedness to each other and our connectedness to our land. And it's a form of cultural resistance that is medical, that is educational, that is social, that is, it affects every aspect of the Palestinian life. And it is really what is carrying us through over 75 years of occupation. Our sumud is vast, but it's not endless. And we are now faced with a situation that the whole world is not able to help us with while we are watching and televising our own genocide. So my appeal to everybody is to drop everything and try to stop this genocide, because it is not just affecting us Palestinians, it's affecting the humanity. And I urge everyone to do whatever they can to make this go away. And, you know, we have been in the medical community organizing, but it's not enough. Where are the rest of our colleagues? They should also stand up and end this genocide. And, you know, as part of Doctors Against Genocide, we are trying as much as possible to advocate with politicians, with elected officials, with different organizations all over the world. And we are doing a lot, but it's still not enough.
I will get there as well, Kerima, in this
so
second session. No worries. Thank you very much. Sometimes it's really difficult to understand Palestinians. I mean, even if you live there, because I've been in Gaza for 3 years. Every month at the end of the week, I was staying there. I was based there. And whenever you have an interview, you're asking, you know, the Palestinians, the mother who lost their child or child who lost their mother, the only thing you can hear, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. If you don't know what does this mean, it is impossible to understand the Palestinians. And I think the only Palestinians using this La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah all the time. And it was difficult for me to understand. I've been in those areas, and I was always thinking that if I face such a thing, what would I do? Anyway, I'm not going to talk too much because I have other guests to explain for us. I want to continue with Zaina and write my name on my leg, Mama. When the Gaza war started, it was a viral, this poem. And first, I would like to listen this poem from you, and then I'll ask my questions, Zaina, please.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. It is such an honor to be here with everybody on this panel and to be invited by KADEM, the Women in Democracy Foundation. I am delighted that KADEM wanted to include poetry in this session, which is an old art form, not only in Arab culture, but throughout the world. But it's very much revered, and it's very important in Arab culture and in Palestinian culture, too. As Fatih said, I wrote this poem toward the beginning of the entire war on Gaza. And it was inspired by the fact that mothers and fathers were writing the names of their children on their arms and legs so that they would be identified in case they were killed, especially as their houses fell down on them. Write my name. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Use a black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet, the one that doesn't melt if it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Make the lines thick and clear. Add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when I go to sleep. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and on the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we will be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and please write your name and Baba's name on your legs too, so we will be remembered as a family. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Don't add any numbers like when I was born or the address of our home. I don't want the world to list me as a number. I have a name and I'm not a number. Write my name on my leg, Mama. When the bomb hits our house, when the walls crush our skulls and bones, our legs will tell our story, how there was nowhere for us to run.
Thank you very much. Palestinian women in diaspora, they now have a big role to play to help rebuild and recover their homeland. This is also a form of resistance when you look at it, and the Palestinians are known now more than ever for their resilience. From Tarab Abdul Hadi, a Palestinian feminist born in Jenin in 1910, who founded the Palestinian Women's Congress, which resisted the British mandate's occupation of Palestine, to Fatima Bernabi, who was among some of the first to mobilize against Israeli colonization and was the first female Palestinian political prisoner. And even today, figures like Ahad Tamimi, who made headlines around the world for slapping an Israeli soldier. And Zaina, that very notion is felt your poetry as well. Can you tell us about the development of poetry in Palestine and especially resistance poetry?
Yep, there we go. Okay, thank you for that question. Before I answer it, I'd just like to mention to everyone that the Arabic word for a poet is sha'ir. And the word sha'ir comes from the root for sensing and feeling. So the poet in the Arab world has been someone who kind of embodies that sensing, that feeling, and the emotion and the response to what happens in society. Of course, we all have that capacity, but the poet tries to put it into words. In fact, poetry is a very old art form in Arab society, dating back to pre-Islamic times, when it was an oral art form. And it was written down, of course, after the Holy Quran was revealed and then written down, and that's when Arabic poetry started being written down as well. Palestinian poetry is squarely in this tradition, but Palestinians have also had to address particular challenges because of their situation. In the beginning, after the catastrophic dislocation of the Nakba, which continues to this day, in 1948, Palestinian writers and poets inside Israel were very much cut off from the literary developments from the rest of the Arab world, and from literature too, from world literature. They had limited means of publishing their work, and their poetry of resistance spread orally because censorship under Israeli military occupation. Many of them actually learned Hebrew so that they could read Hebrew translations and read world poets. During the early years, they smuggled Arabic poetry in and out of Palestine so they could find out about literary developments in the Arab world and have their own works sent out and read. But generally, they were on the margins of literary movements for years and could not participate in them. Palestinian society in what was now Israel was devastated not just politically, but also in terms of unemployment and underemployment and dropping out of school and censorship and prohibitions against poetry evenings in villages. Of course, the Palestinians also faced very repressive policies under military occupation. Israel routinely imprisoned writers and poets from 48 Palestine. So in the face of these serious challenges, resistance poetry flourished. And writing and symbolism became important. In a way, words became weapons. The Palestinian poets also saw their struggle as part of the world revolutionary movement at that time. So these were called resistance poets or platform poets. They used poetry to express political opinions and to rouse the masses, to galvanize the masses. They included literary greats such as Mahmoud Darwish, Samih al-Qasim, Tawfiq Zayyad, and Fadwa Tuqan. So this tradition of resistance poetry continues to this day. But it's important to note that Palestinian poetry also goes beyond the theme of resistance. Palestinian poets write about so much more. They write about war and colonialism, the Arab Spring. They write about women's empowerment, social justice issues, nature and the destruction of our environment, identity, interpersonal relations, collective memory, home and exile, family, love, and all the universal themes. It's crucial to listen to the voices of Palestinians writing in Palestine and inside Israel. And it's important to know that a lot of this poetry has come from Gaza. Of course, poets from Palestine have been writing for centuries. And this kind of cultural production has been thriving in Palestinian society for a long time.
Thank you very much, Zainab. We will get back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll continue with Lina Barkawi. Thank you very much for coming again, Lina. For women making a difference, Lina Barkawi creates actually Palestinian tatrees to keep their culture alive. And there are wars within this war on Gaza, and that includes Israel's goal in robbing Palestinians of their culture, including destroying historical artifacts and their olive trees even. Personally, I think that dress is very stylish. Even my wife, she got one when we were living in Palestine. However, I believe it's seriously challenging as well. Do you think it receives enough attention from the Palestinian youth or internationally?
Thank you for having me amongst these incredibly intelligent and just so articulate. Thank you for your poem. It was beautiful, very moving. And thank you for having me and for your question. Before I begin, just so for everyone to understand, tatriz is an Arabic word that translates to embroidery, but it has globally been now recognized as specifically Palestinian embroidery because Palestinian women for centuries have created a language through their needle and thread. And you can actually see amongst the panelists, 4 of us are wearing tatriz, which is beautiful. And I'll explain a little bit about why it's beautiful. A lot of people don't really understand the origin of tatriz. Tatriz for Palestinians, like I mentioned, is a language, but it's not only just to speak between themselves, it's a way for them to document their surroundings, to document their land, to document their everyday life, to express love and experiences that they face individually. You, before 1948, could identify a woman from her original village simply by the embroidery on her dress. You knew exactly where she was from. You could also tell if she was widowed, if she had children, if she was young. You could tell if she was married or single. All of these details of her individual personality, of her individual identity could be identified through her embroidery. And a lot of people don't really understand that. They think it is just this beautiful art form that can be recognized, but it is so much more than that. After 1948, what we found was because of the Nakba, these women were forcibly displaced into refugee camps. And so what happened was all of these women coming from different villages came together to share their tatriz amongst each other. And so you could no longer tell where someone was from. All you could tell was that they were Palestinian. And that was actually the birth of a national recognition of embroidery as being Palestinian and not so much on an individual level. And so women would use their embroidery in the early days from following the Nakba to survive. They would sell their tatriz. They would use it as a way to make money and income for their family. And because of that, the maker of tatriz was removed from the wearer of tatriz. The person making the tatriz didn't make it themselves for the most part. And Over time as well, you see different evolutions of the use of tatriz during the Intifada times, when the Palestinian flag colors were banned, when other things were banned for Palestinian to form some sort of resistance, peaceful resistance. Palestinian women would spend hours at night with limited light to embroider all of these colors of the Palestinian flag on their dress, because the Israelis could not take their dress off their back. And in that way, they performed resistance against their occupier. And so now in the diaspora, just moving on, because that is my experience, I am a Palestinian living in the diaspora. I learned tatriz actually from my non-Palestinian mother, who is from Panama, but made the connection later on in life. And what I found is I am incredibly distraught that I was separated from this art form when it should have been my right, my blood right. And so one of the things that I'm working on is returning back to this pre-1948 action of embedding yourself in your embroidery. There is no reason that you cannot embed your individuality in addition to your national identity as a Palestinian woman, regardless of where you are. And in that way, we would reclaim the form of connecting the wearer with the maker. So I guess in short, I do believe people do not take it seriously enough. I think there's a lot of history and beauty and stories that are lost, but that can be reclaimed if we turn to the embroidery itself.
So do you get, just small answer maybe, do you get enough attention from the Palestinians in diaspora or other nations in America?
It's changing. I think over time people are continuing to learn. There is becoming more access to this history, to this knowledge. It is being documented a lot more. You see it a lot more discussed in university spaces. So I think with more and more push, we will see that. But I think ultimately, I hope that my fellow Palestinians will think about picking up the needle themselves and not necessarily just buying something from somebody else. I think there's something really valuable in practicing the art form.
Okay, we will get back to you, Elena. I just wondering how it's like, why did you start this? I'm going to ask this the second session, I hope. I will continue with Safa Salam. And Safa, there is a large Arab community in the US, and they have played a huge role in putting pressure on their government for the support of Israel. Can you give us some insight into this large community, how powerful they are, and impact this war on Gaza has had on the Palestinian Arab population in America and here?
Certainly, that's a really great question. And I first want to extend my gratitude for being on this panel. I'm very honored to be surrounded by such brilliant and inspiring women. In terms of your question, I think the first question that I will kind of ask back is, what exactly does it mean to be Arab? I think Arab and Palestinian are often erroneously conflated, that they are equated to mean the same thing, and that's often used to reinforce this idea that Palestinians can simply be relocated to one of the other 20 Arab countries across the Middle East. And so in first dissecting what the term Arab even means, it's important to understand and acknowledge that Arab is a multi-defined term that can refer to the language that one speaks. There are people who speak Arabic but don't necessarily identify as Arab, and there are Arabs who come from Arabia, and there are Arabs who are known to be just from the Middle East. And so Arab is not necessarily an ethnicity or a race, but in fact an identity that spans a conglomerate of different definitions. And so when we apply that term to the U.S., it's important to understand the way that U.S. legislation actually inhibits us from capturing the true extent of our Arab community. And so for context, for many of our members of the audience who may not be familiar with U.S. legislation, in the United States, the U.S. Census drives a lot of federal funding. It's responsible for around $1 trillion in federal funding, and this funding is kind of divided across a cohort of different institutions, including our Department of Education, our Department of Housing, our Department of Health Services, and this can really influence the entire experience of the Arab community across the social sector. And so the important thing here is that the U.S. Census does not offer any opportunity to actually identify as Arab. Arabs are identified and categorized as white on the U.S. Census and often involved or, kind of swallowed by this enormous white population. Per the 2020 U.S. Census, our most recent U.S. Census, the white population in the United States was around, I believe, 54% of the U.S. population. And so if we look at 54% of the U.S. population as being the population that Arabs are categorized under, we can see how that really erases the kind of experiences that Arabs have. And so this is largely problematic because when it comes to elections, the Arab community, especially in this 2024 election, has proven to be extremely important. As many of you have seen, the United States is largely responsible for a lot of the catastrophe that is kind of running across Gaza right now. The U.S. is the largest donor to Israel, and Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. military aid, with military aid in the billions with a B, and the taxpayers are responsible for that donation. And so our own population here in the U.S., including our large Arab population, is paying taxes to a government that they don't necessarily support, which is driving a new recent kind of campaign where Arabs are now writing uncommitted on their ballots and kind of sending a message to the U.S. elections that the Electoral College, which is really a mess and kind of corrupt in its own facets, cannot succeed without kind of enfranchising the Arab community. And so in recent statistics, we see that around 21% of Wisconsin, for example, an important swing state that Biden or Trump kind of needs to secure an election win this year, voted uncommitted. In Michigan, that was also nearly 20% of their voters voting uncommitted. This is unprecedented, something that we've never seen before in U.S. history, sending a very clear signal to the U.S. election system that they do need to value Arabs and that we are an important population here that does need to be taken seriously. And so kind of this crisis that we see within the U.S. legislation and its inhibition kind of drives the question of, well, why are Arabs categorized as white? And this dates back to 1915. History is everything. Historical context is very important. We've seen that within the context of Palestine, especially now. In the historical context, in 1915, a key legislative case across the federal courts here called Dow versus U.S. was the first case in which Arabs were first classified as whites. And it was because being identified as white was the key to ensuring citizenship within this country. Citizenship is often one's right and privilege to accessing health services. I'm a medical student, so I care very deeply about healthcare. So a lot of my interest will be on health. But without citizenship, one can be largely disenfranchised from American society and social services. And so being identified as white at the time meant Arabs could gain access to citizenship. But why were we identified as white? It was because the majority of immigrants to the U.S. at the time from the Middle East were Christian Arabs. And the argument was that Christianity was proximal to whiteness because Jesus was white in the context of U.S. history. Therefore, Arabs should be identified as white because they come from the same land. And in fact, the right to citizenship was not extended to Muslim Arabs who immigrated into the country until 1952, again highlighting how legislation is often problematic and limits our ability to understand the extent of the Arab population in the United States. And so the Arab population is incredibly important. The U.S. Census does not currently categorize them, which means we have no understanding of just how large they are, although our assumption is that they number at least within the millions. And it's really important that we empower this community and start to understand and assess their experiences, especially when we're considering winning full elections within the 2024 year. And so my work is with the American Foundation for Improving Arab Health, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're running the first national study on Arab health to kind of at least get us an idea of what their experiences are. And so it was a great question.
Thank you very much, Safa. The other day when I catch the Uber, the driver was from Palestine as well. As a young boy, he's like his late 20s maybe. And I asked him, have you ever been in Palestine? And he said, I have an American passport. I tried to enter from the Jordan, but I couldn't manage it. I mean, it is like we have lots of Turkish diaspora as well in every country. And they have no problem. They always can go to Turkey and start living there. But if you are Palestinian, even you carrying a really important passport, like American passport, you're not able to go to Palestine. I will continue with Feda again, dear ambassador. Palestine is not a permanent member, just an observer, which undermines Palestinian self-determination on its own. Are steps being taken for Palestine to become a member, permanent member in UN? Is it possible?
Thank you for that question. You're very right that Palestine is been excluded from admission as a member state to the United Nations, and this is actually yet another violation of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. And my position, and I think it's widely shared, is that Palestine has every right to take its place among the family of nations. And this right, it's not that it's just been unjustly denied for the past 76 years since the partition of historic Palestine by the General Assembly, but it's actually been denied for more than 100 years. Following the end of World War I and Palestine's designation by the League of Nations as a Class A mandate, meaning among the nations in the Middle East, it was ready for independence. A people, a civilization, not a land without a people, for a people without a land. And so obviously, it's unjust to continue depriving Palestine of its equality among the countries of the world just because its independence and sovereignty as a state are being obstructed by Israel. It is a state under occupation, but it is a state consisting of a distinct people and population, a distinct geography, the ability to enter into agreements among states. And I think it is more widely known now that Palestine is recognized by 140 countries around the world and has diplomatic relations and representations akin to embassies in many of the other countries that may have not formally yet recognized Palestine. Palestine's flag flies outside of the United Nations by way of a General Assembly resolution that we pursued in 2015. And it is a full member state of the League of Arab States, of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, of the Non-Aligned Movement, of the Group of 77 in China, and it even held the rotating chairmanship of the G77 on behalf of the Asia-Pacific countries in 2019. So there is no reason to continue to obstruct Palestine from taking its rightful place within the international community, or to continue postponing Palestine's membership until an agreement is reached with our occupier to end its legal occupation. That would mean granting Israel veto power over Palestine's existence within the family of nations, and it would mean allowing Israel to further deprive our people of their nationhood, and which is a central manifestation of any people's right to self-determination. And so, I would also have to ask that, why was Israel admitted as a member state to the United Nations in 1949, despite the fact that the conflict was unresolved, despite the fact that at the time there were over 950,000 Palestinian refugees who were uprooted from their homeland, dispersed throughout the region, and obstructed from returning to their homes and ancestral lands by Israel, despite General Assembly Resolution 194, and that no solution to their plight was realized. To this day, they are millions of people, and yet Israel was admitted to the UN, and Palestine was erased or excluded. And our existence as an observer state in the UN system is particularly a result of what was referred to by Karama, which is the steadfastness of the Palestinian people and an insistence not to be erased. And so, yes, we are pursuing steps for Palestine's admission to full UN membership, and many countries support this effort. And in fact, it's been widely endorsed by all regional and geopolitical organizations. And, this would be important not just as a symbolic matter, but as a crucial reaffirmation of Palestine's existence and the right of our people to self-determination.
Thank you very much for that. We're really coming to the end of our session. But Zeina, you also working for We Are Not Numbers. Shortly, can you explain who are these guys and what you are exactly doing?
Yes, thank you. The organization I volunteered with since 2015 is called We Are Not Numbers. You can find them online, actually, wearenotnumbers.org. And it's a Gaza-based youth-led project of the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. And it aims to counteract the the lack of Palestinian perspective or context in the news by having young people in Gaza write about their experiences and about their lives. They're mostly university students or young professionals. They write essays and poems about their lives, the culture and history of Gaza, the seashore, the olive harvest, soccer, university life, and much more. But of course, recently, what they are writing about is what they are experiencing right now in the war on Gaza and the genocide unfolding there. In fact, several of them have been killed. Certainly, many of them have seen family members and friends killed. And we are getting emails from them saying, "Can you publish this attached story if I die?" And it's just shocking, you know. I mean, I don't have to tell you what the youth in Gaza are experiencing. They even say things like, you know, when you ask them how old are you, they'll say, I have a bachelor's degree in war because I've seen 4 wars. I'm working on a master's degree. War has become such a profound part of their experience. And many of them are now saying, you know, I'd rather die from a bomb than be starved to death. There's one young man whom I worked with just before October 7th, and I'm in touch with him. He sends me voice messages and tells me about his family and what they're experiencing. They haven't had fruits or vegetables for 5 months now. They have 1 meal a day. They're mixing flour with a small amount of white flour with ground animal feed, you know, barley and corn. And so we must reinstate the UNRWA funding also to help these people. He lives in northern Gaza. Where there's a huge, I mean, we are in famine, I think, a situation. Do I have a moment to read his poem? So he wrote a poem that I worked with him, it's his words. And he writes, it's titled Nothing, and it's by Ahmed from Gaza. I'm still breathing, but that is not enough to feel alive. I lost my loved ones, I lost my power, hope, dreams, and my last tears. Nothing can express the pain of losing the people who were a main part of my life. Nothing can erase the last look at them from my eyes. Nothing can stop replaying our memories before Israel took them away. And nothing can let me imagine moving forward with my life after them. And I'll just add that it is such an honor for me to work with people from Gaza. My family is from inside Israel and on the West Bank and Jerusalem. So it's a privilege to get to know these young people and to know what they're thinking and what they're sharing and what they want to tell the world. You know, poetry is about telling your story, and I'd be happy to talk about that more, but I think I'll let you.
Thank you very much, Zeina. Karima. You are also a co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide. Can you just tell us about the Doctors Genocide?
So what I have witnessed and many others have witnessed since October 7th is a rise in organization between medical professionals, similar to what happened in the 70s or the 60s in this country right after the civil rights movement. And one of the organizations that I'm involved with, that I co-founded with a classmate of mine, Dr. Nidal Jbour, is called Doctors Against Genocide. And what we have been doing is we have been educating our colleagues about the international definition of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, trying to unite the medical voices against these atrocities because they are a healthcare threat. As we have seen, healthcare is the first one to be affected, and by destroying the healthcare, the genocidal, psychotic onslaught on the people, it becomes very apparent. And Israel has succeeded to a great degree in destroying the medical fabric of Gaza. Therefore, the medical community should organize and should fight back. I'm just going to read to you a small list of items that Israel has banned from the aid. And you can see that most of them are medical. They banned anesthetics, they banned oxygen cylinders, water ventilators, water filtration systems, wheelchairs, and surgical scissors. So that tells you how the medical section is being targeted in particular. So what our message for the medical community is that justice is important for health. And we in the medical community have to speak up for our colleagues when they are targeted, incarcerated, and killed. And we cannot be silent in face of these atrocities. And we urge the international community to stand up with us, and we have seen the medical doctors from Australia, UK, the Arab world, Turkey, Algeria, Malaysia, we're working together. We need the politicians to work with us, and we should not underestimate our voices when we ask for justice for our colleagues.
Thank you very much, Kerima. Lena, just really shortly, I just want to ask you as well, do you have any other project in your mind soon?
Personally? No, I mean, I think my primary focus right now is helping women in the diaspora gain access to the knowledge of making a Palestinian dress specifically. That is the primary object on which tatriz is put on, and it's a clear indicator of someone's Palestinianness. But part of that experience is not necessarily just copying a dress that we have from Gaza, from Ramallah, from Jerusalem, but making it unique to that individual. So my hope is that this woman feels empowered, that as her own individual, as her own self, she is just as much Palestinian as anyone else who was born and raised in Palestine. And her contribution is a contribution to the Palestinian preservation of this art form. And so that is my primary project right now.
Thank you very much. And Safa, again, is shortly. Do you believe that the communities in America, Arab communities, or all associations are working good enough to be voice of Palestinian people or the region?
Yeah, I think it is difficult to give voice to a population that is largely being erased. And it's quite sad. My parents live in Palestine, so I'm very, passionate about this cause. And so I will say that the Arab community in the United States has really impressed me. The ability for them to organize, to show up in numbers, to show up out, has been phenomenal. But moreover, they have really showed that Palestine is not just an Arab issue, but an issue of humanity, a social justice issue, an issue that is everyone's issue. For surely we are not free until all of us are free. And so I have been largely inspired by the Arab community, but more so inspired by all the people, especially in this room, who show up and have no ties to the land whatsoever. And so it is heartwarming for me that people are kind of showing up. They're putting themselves out there and they're organizing and they're kind of demonstrating to the world that this is not something that we can tolerate any longer. So, yes, I think that they're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be actually here and moderating this session. We came the end of our time. I really thank you to KADEM, the Women and Democracy Association, and it was established on March 8, 2013, exactly 11 years ago, and to undertake initiatives concerning women's rights all around the world, including Turkey as well. I really thank our speakers to coming to DC on behalf of KADEM, and I also really thank you, our guests, to listening us for 1 hour and 15 minutes in this room. Thank you very much.